Silence is powerful, but only when it's real. The moment they sense it's just a tactic, a move you're using to provoke something in them, it loses all its weight. My friends, let's get something straight. Silence has always been powerful, but only when it is born from truth, not strategy. Real silence doesn't seek to be noticed. It doesn't wait to be acknowledged. It doesn't sit in the dark, hoping someone comes looking. Real silence comes from clarity. It comes from a man who has stopped performing pain and started embodying peace. The kind of silence that hits hardest is not the one that says, "I'm hurt," but the one that says, "I've outgrown this." It's the quiet that comes after you've looked at your past, not with bitterness, but with detachment, when you've seen the pattern for what it is and chosen not to dance with it anymore. But here's where most people go wrong. They think going quiet is the answer. They believe disappearing will create longing. They convince themselves that absence will be enough. But what if they've already seen this version of you before? What if they already know that your silence isn't the end, just another pause in the same cycle? What if they're not haunted by your absence because they're certain you'll return? You've been told that pulling back will make them chase. But what if I told you they're not chasing because they're not afraid? They've predicted this. And the reason it doesn't shake them is because they know you're still watching, you're still hoping, you're still tethered to the outcome, and that is not power. That is captivity. Before I tell you how to truly reclaim yourself, how to shift the game completely, stay with me. Because once you understand what real silence feels like, not the kind that waits, but the kind that walks, you'll never fall back into the same trap again. Imagine this. You think you're playing chess, pulling away to force their move. But what if they've played this game longer than you? What if they already know how many turns until you break? What if they've already accepted your silence as part of the pattern, and they're just waiting for you to prove them right? Let's be honest. How many times have you thought going silent was your power move? How many times did you sit with your phone, waiting for a sign, convincing yourself they'd feel your absence, only to realize nothing changed? Not because silence is weak, but because it wasn't real, because you were still holding on, because your silence still revolved around their reaction. I remember reading a story once. A man went silent on his ex, thinking it would make her unravel. Months later, she returned, not with regret, not with love, but with certainty. She told him, "I knew you weren't really gone. You were just waiting." And in that moment, he realized. His silence didn't disturb her. It comforted her. It told her she still had control. I've been there. I've played that role, hoping my withdrawal would change someone who had already let me go. But silence, when used to provoke, always turns inward. It becomes a prison, and the one who breaks first loses. So what's the move? If silence alone isn't the answer, what is? You stop using silence as bait and start using it as closure. You stop disappearing to be found and start evolving to be unreachable. The true power of silence isn't in being missed. It's in becoming someone who no longer fits the narrative they once held you in. When you're no longer pretending to be strong, when you actually are, your absence becomes undeniable. Your stillness becomes final. And the moment they realize you're not coming back, not because you're angry, but because you've transcended the game altogether, that's when the silence finally speaks. And what it says is simple. I'm not where you left me. I've moved on. As Nikita Gill once wrote, they buried you, thinking you were dead, but they didn't know you were a seed. Let them look. Let them wonder. But by the time they realize what you've become, you'll be too far ahead for them to ever reach again. You don't rise by watching. You rise by deciding. If this hit where it needed to, subscribe to Stoic Station. Hit like, and share it with someone who's still waiting to be chosen. And stay with us. We're not just building strength. We're building men who don't look back. 1. Replace silence with self-expansion. For years you may have been told that silence is strength, that withdrawing your voice, your energy, your presence is how you reclaim your dignity when someone has taken you for granted. That retreating into stillness will shake them into noticing the void you left behind. But here's the brutal truth most people never tell you. Silence, when done with the secret hope of being seen, is not strength. It's a quiet plea. It is still about them. It is still about being noticed. And when your growth is rooted in their recognition, you're not growing, you're performing. The Stoic doesn't disappear to create distance. He disappears to become someone new. He doesn't vanish hoping others will look for him. He vanishes because he's already found himself again. And that difference changes everything. So if you're tempted to use silence as your sword, ask yourself, what are you really waiting for? A message? A call? A post that proves they're hurting without you? Are you scrolling through stories, interpreting shadows and crumbs, looking for clues that your absence has made a dent? Then you're not silent. You're on pause, caught in a waiting room of your own making. The Stoic knows this trap. He's lived it. But he doesn't stay there. He replaces the void with expansion. Expansion is not loud. It is not dramatic. It does not need to be announced. It begins in the unseen spaces. The morning you wake up and decide to move your body, not to look better for them, but to feel alive in your own skin. The afternoon you choose to read a book instead of rereading old messages. The night you sit with your discomfort instead of reaching out for a temporary fix. Self-expansion is not revenge. It's not a strategy to win back control. It is a declaration that you are no longer willing to live a life that depends on someone else's recognition. Take a class that scares you. Learn a skill that requires humility and presence. Woodworking, martial arts, public speaking. Not to impress anyone, but to reconnect with your own process of becoming. Join a group of people who don't know your history, who aren't impressed by who you used to be, who hold you to the man you say you are today. Replace silence with motion, not chaotic, desperate motion, but deliberate movement toward your highest self. Structure your mornings with discipline, even when no one is watching. Set goals that have nothing to do with being desired and everything to do with becoming undeniable to yourself. And here's the most profound part. The more you expand, the more their silence shrinks in comparison. What once felt like rejection becomes irrelevant. What once echoed as abandonment becomes background noise. Their presence or absence no longer dictates your emotional climate, because you've outgrown the space they used to occupy. That's when everything begins to change. You stop playing the game. You stop checking if they've noticed, because now you're noticing yourself. You're hearing the way your thoughts have become stronger, steadier. You're watching the way your body moves through the world with more power, more calm. You begin to see yourself not through the lens of your loss, but through the light of your rebirth. There's a sacred moment, and you'll know when it happens, when the thought of them simply passes through you without tension. No tightness in your chest, no urge to respond. No fantasies of revenge or redemption, just space, just peace, just forward. That's what replacing silence with self-expansion does. It doesn't just shift the dynamic, it removes the game entirely, because silence can still be manipulation if it's rooted in the desire to be chased. But self-expansion is liberation. It's a full-body, full-mind, full-heart declaration that you have chosen yourself for real this time. So what does that actually look like? It looks like joining that gym, not to sculpt a body to be admired, but to rebuild a relationship with discipline. It looks like sitting in a coffee shop reading Marcus Aurelius, underlining passages not for social media posts, but because the words actually remind you of who you are beneath the scars. It looks like reconnecting with people who make you laugh without needing to explain your pain. It looks like journaling every night, not just to vent, but to witness your own progress. Some days will feel hollow. That's okay. Expansion doesn't mean constant confidence. It means holding steady when your old self begs to run backward. It means honoring the version of you that was lost, but choosing not to return to him. You may find that the person you used to obsess over begins to fade. Their name carries less weight. Their absence no longer creates an ache, but an opening for something new, something real, something you've never had before, your full presence. And they might reach out one day. It happens. A message, a breadcrumb, a moment of nostalgia from them, wondering if you're still lingering in the same emotional hallway where they left you. But by then, you won't be there. You'll be elsewhere, perhaps not in a different city, but in a different state of being, one where they no longer have access. Not because you blocked them, but because you've become unreachable by smallness, by ego games, by emotional crumbs. And that is the most stoic, most ruthless, most beautifully detached move you can make. You didn't just go silent. You expanded so far beyond the game that you became invisible to it. Not as a ghost haunting the past, but as a man who simply moved beyond its reach. So don't just disappear. Transformation, because silence is temporary, but self-expansion, that's eternal. 2. Stop waiting, start leading. There comes a point in every man's life when he realizes the cost of waiting, not just in time, but in energy, in identity, in the quiet erosion of his own purpose. He's spent days, weeks, sometimes years, lingering in emotional limbo, hoping, watching, analyzing, hoping someone will come around, watching for signs they still care, analyzing every word, every silence, every shift in tone. It feels like control, but it's not. It's reaction. It's existing in response to someone else's behavior. And no man can lead his life from that place. Stoicism teaches us that leadership begins not with authority over others, but with sovereignty over self. And sovereignty doesn't come when you're waiting to be chosen. It comes the moment you decide you don't need to be. It's easy to lose yourself in the waiting for closure, waiting for validation, waiting for them to finally see what they missed. But waiting keeps you orbiting someone else's gravity, and every second you spend there is a second not spent building your own center. The most dangerous part of emotional waiting is how subtle it can be. You may convince yourself you've moved on, that you're strong, silent, detached, but deep down, you're still checking your phone, still curating your social media presence for them to see, still wondering what they'd think if they saw you now, still reacting to the ghost of someone who no longer walks beside you. But life, real life, doesn't wait. It moves. And those who wait too long are left behind in their own story. You want to reclaim your power? Then lead. Not for attention, not for revenge, not even to prove your worth, but because you finally understand that your time here is finite, and wasting it on people who wouldn't fight for you is not a quiet strength. It's a quiet tragedy. Start writing your next chapter like they were never a necessary character in it. You don't need to erase them, but you do need to stop revolving your choices around a possibility that no longer exists. Start making plans that have nothing to do with proving a point and everything to do with becoming the man you were meant to be. Whether it's launching that business you've kept on the back burner, traveling somewhere new alone, or finally showing up for yourself in ways you never did while trying to impress someone else, make moves that are entirely your own. A true leader doesn't just walk forward. He walks first. He chooses a direction before anyone applauds, before anyone validates, before anyone even notices. Because the path isn't about being seen. It's about being real. And the truth is, the minute you stop looking over your shoulder, you begin to see the road ahead with absolute clarity. This kind of leadership is not loud. It doesn't need to announce itself. It shows up in your posture, in the way you carry yourself, in the decisions you make even when no one is watching. It shows up in your refusal to play games, your ability to say no, your focus on what builds you rather than what distracts you. It's not easy. Leading your life, especially after heartbreak, betrayal, or disappointment, takes more courage than reacting ever did. Because it requires you to stand still long enough to ask yourself, what do I want now, without them in the picture? Who do I want to be, if this chapter really is closed for good? Those questions are not answered overnight. But every time you choose action over analysis, movement over mourning, purpose over pity, you begin to answer them. There's a deep kind of peace that comes when you finally stop waiting for someone else to show up for you. When you stop needing their apology. When you stop hoping for a moment that may never come. You realize you don't need their validation because you've begun to build your own. You don't need their closure because you've already started to open doors they were never meant to walk through with you. That's the moment you shift from surviving to leading. So if you've been caught in that place, that strange emotional stasis where your life feels paused while you wait for them to notice, regret, return, it's time to let that go, not just because it's unproductive, but because it's unworthy of the man you're becoming. You're not here to be chosen. You're here to choose yourself every single day and live accordingly. The moment you stop waiting, you take the first step toward a life designed not by circumstance, but by character. And that's where leadership truly begins. 3. Starve the cycle. Don't just go silent, go still. There is a kind of silence that screams, a silence filled with tension, anticipation, and unspoken desires. It's the silence of someone who is waiting, watching, hoping to be missed. A strategic withdrawal meant to evoke a reaction, to stir regret, to manipulate absence into attention. But that silence, no matter how long it lasts, is still part of the same emotional loop, a cycle of connection laced with dependency, reaction, and subtle longing. And they know that cycle. They've played it before. They expect your silence to be temporary. They've seen the patterns: withdrawal followed by return, distance followed by desperate reconnection. They don't flinch when you go quiet because, deep down, they're not afraid of losing you. They've learned to wait you out, to let your silence run its course, to welcome you back when your resolve begins to crack. To them, silence is just another round. But there's something they're not prepared for. Something far more unsettling than anger or disappearance. Something that doesn't beg, doesn't chase, doesn't even respond. Stillness. Stillness is not silence. Stillness is surrender, not to them, but to yourself. It is the moment you stop seeking to be heard and start listening inward. It's the shift from reaction to groundedness, from proving something to owning everything. Stillness is what happens when you no longer care to be noticed, when your value is not up for negotiation, when your center is so solid that nothing outside of you has the power to shake it. They expect distance, not depth. They expect coldness, not clarity. That's why stillness confuses them, because it doesn't operate in the language of drama. It doesn't bait, doesn't perform, doesn't even announce its presence. It just is. Calm, resolute, unshakable. And for those who feed on chaos, that kind of presence is terrifying, because they can't reach it, they can't provoke it, they can't manipulate it. And in that stillness, they are forced to face the one thing they've been trying to avoid, their own emptiness. But stillness is not easy to enter. it requires a different kind of courage. The kind that doesn't come from anger or ego, but from discipline and self-trust. Stillness asks you to sit with the discomfort rather than soothe it, to breathe through the ache rather than distract yourself from it, to allow the pain to surface, all of it, and not flinch. It asks you to stop performing strength and actually build it from the inside out. This is where transformation begins. Start each morning not with scrolling or checking who noticed your absence, but with breath. A few moments of conscious inhaling. Feel your body. Acknowledge your thoughts without judgment. When the urge arises to reach out, to check their page, to look for signs, pause. Let it pass like a wave. Stillness doesn't mean the storm won't come. It means you've trained yourself to remain unmoved within it. Meditation isn't just a practice. It's an act of rebellion in a world addicted to reaction. Sitting still, with yourself, with your emotions, is an act of radical presence, and presence is power. Because the person who no longer seeks control cannot be controlled. Stillness also requires space. Clear your environment. Clean your room. Get rid of physical clutter so your mind can breathe. Create rituals that ground you. A walk without your phone, journaling under soft light, cold showers that shock you into alertness. These aren't trends, they are tools. Every small act of grounded intention becomes a brick in the fortress of your inner self. You'll notice that in stillness, clarity rises. What once felt confusing starts to make sense. What once felt like love is revealed as attachment. What once held power over you now simply fades. And the people who once pulled your strings begin to lose their grip, not because you cut them off, but because you no longer respond. There's a moment you'll experience, not dramatic, not loud, where you realize you haven't thought about them in days, where their name enters your mind and leaves with no weight. That's not numbness. That's not indifference born from pain. That's peace. Hard-earned, deeply rooted peace. And maybe one day they'll notice, maybe they'll reach out, maybe they'll test the waters with a casual message. But the difference now is that your stillness has changed the current. You're no longer in the same emotional ocean. You're grounded on land, steady, still, sovereign. You don't need to block them. You don't need to announce anything. The man you've become simply doesn't respond to the old games. That is how you starve the cycle. Not by disappearing, but by becoming unreachable through stillness. Because when you're no longer playing, there's no longer a game. And that's what true power looks like. 4. Delete the breadcrumb trail, digitally and mentally. Healing isn't just about time. It's about clearing the path. Not only the one that lies ahead of you, but the one that lives behind you. The one filled with digital remnants and emotional leftovers that quietly keep you tethered to what you swore you were moving on from. You can say you're done. You can tell yourself you've let go. But as long as you're still scrolling through the photos, still listening to the playlist you built together, still rereading that last conversation in search of hidden meaning, you're not moving forward. You're circling the past, trying to find comfort in moments that no longer serve you. And that cycle doesn't heal you, it haunts you. Let's be honest. We live in an age where memories don't fade on their own. They linger in your devices, in your saved chats, in your social media algorithms, waiting to trigger your hope all over again. One old notification, one tagged photo, one memory post that pops up on this day, and suddenly the progress you made begins to crack under the weight of nostalgia. But nostalgia is deceptive. It wears the mask of warmth while quietly feeding your longing, and longing left unchecked becomes an addiction, not to the person, but to the idea of who they were at their best, to the version of the story where it almost worked. And that illusion is what keeps you stuck. That's why healing isn't just emotional. It's logistical, it's practical. It's an act of reclaiming your mental space by cleaning up the digital trail that keeps tempting you back into memory, not to punish yourself or pretend they never mattered, but to free yourself from the version of yourself that needed them to matter. So start where it hurts, your phone. Go to the photo album. Delete the pictures that pull you back. Not the obvious ones, not just the ones where you're smiling together, but the quiet ones, the blurry ones, the ones you kept, not for how they looked, but for how they made you feel. That just-in-case folder, erase it. You don't need a digital archive of what used to be. You don't need reminders of promises that were never kept. Move next to the music. That playlist you both shared, that one song that always takes you back, it's time to retire it. Music is memory's loudest voice. It speaks directly to your emotional core. And while it might feel comforting to hear their song late at night, that comfort is temporary, and it comes at the cost of progress. Choose silence over sentiment if you must. Or better yet, replace it with something new. A soundtrack for who you're becoming, not who you used to be. Now, the messages. Archive the threads, the long conversations you keep rereading. Let them go. They're not letters from someone who's still present. They're echoes. Echoes of a connection that no longer exists in real time. And each time you revisit those words, hoping to extract new meaning, you are trying to resurrect a feeling that has already had its time. Closure does not live in old texts. It lives in your decision to stop looking. And if you've kept their number but blocked them just in case, be honest with yourself. Just in case is another phrase for I'm still hoping. If you've blocked them, it should be for your peace, not for effect. And if you haven't, ask why. Ask what part of you still needs access to someone who no longer brings you clarity. Because the truth is, you cannot heal while holding on. You cannot evolve while staying emotionally accessible to a past you've outgrown. And you cannot truly let go while keeping pieces of them scattered across your mental landscape like breadcrumbs leading back to confusion. Healing, true healing, requires you to clear the trail. It means understanding that if they wanted to walk beside you, they would have. That you don't need to track their steps to move forward on your own. It means recognizing that peace comes not when they return with closure, but when you remove the hooks that kept them alive in your mind. It's not about erasing your history. It's about refusing to let your history write your future. You can honor what you had without holding on to the pain it left behind. You can respect the lessons without romanticizing the damage. You can love who you were without needing to stay there. This isn't about bitterness. This is about boundaries. Boundaries between the life you once imagined and the reality you're choosing now. The moment you decide to delete, to detach, to declutter, that is the moment you reclaim space for new energy, for clarity, for genuine connection that doesn't rely on chasing or remembering. So clear the trail, digitally, emotionally, spiritually. Let the past remain where it belongs, in the rearview mirror, acknowledged, appreciated, but no longer followed. Because healing doesn't come from waiting for someone to return to a version of themselves that once made you feel seen. Healing comes when you stop searching for their light and start building your own. 5. Turn absence into art. There is a kind of emptiness that feels like it will swallow you whole, the kind that arrives not with violence, but with quiet. The kind left behind when someone walks away without explanation, when the connection fades without warning, when the silence is not just a pause but a confirmation. In that void, the instinct is to ache, to wait, to reach out. But if you listen closely, beneath the pain, there's a different kind of invitation, an invitation not to suffer but to create. Pain, when channeled, becomes power. Absence, when honored, becomes art. The space they left behind is not useless. It is sacred. It's a blank canvas, raw and unfinished, waiting for your hands to shape it into something more than memory. This is where your next chapter begins, not in the echo of what was lost, but in the act of building something new, not to prove a point, not to make them regret, but to make yourself whole again through creation. Write, even if your words come out fragmented and trembling. Paint, even if your hands feel unsteady. Build something real with your time, with your presence, with the hours you used to give away so freely. Turn their absence into fuel, not for destruction, but for legacy. That is how you reclaim your story. They don't fear your silence. They're used to silence. They expect it. What they never anticipate is your transformation. The fact that instead of falling apart, you grew stronger. Instead of losing yourself, you found something eternal within you. They don't expect the version of you who rises from the ashes not to return to them, but to rise beyond them. Heartbreak is often mistaken for an end, but in truth, it is a doorway, a threshold, a violent invitation into deeper purpose, deeper power, deeper selfhood. You don't need to erase the pain to move forward. You need to repurpose it. Let it flow into the things you build. Let it shape the art you leave behind. Let it become the heartbeat of your next evolution. Because true power is not in showing them you've moved on. It's in forgetting you ever needed to. It's in waking up one day, fully immersed in something meaningful, something beautiful, and realizing that what once hurt now hums softly in the background, like the final notes of a song you no longer need to replay. Your greatest revenge will never be silence. It will be the masterpiece you become because of what tried to break you. 6. Prepare for the return and stay unavailable. They always come back. Most of them do. Not because they've suddenly become better, wiser, or more deserving, but because something shifts when your energy is no longer circling them, when your attention is no longer guaranteed, when your silence stretches long enough that it stops being a message and becomes a reality. At first, they may dismiss it, thinking it's temporary. They've seen you quiet before. They've counted on your emotional return. But this time feels different. This time, there is no tension in the air. No digital breadcrumbs leading back to your vulnerability. No open windows left for them to crawl through. And that's what pulls them in. Not your anger, not your distance, but your detachment. Eventually, it happens. A message, a like, a memory shared to stir something in you. They test the waters, waiting for the old version of you to resurface. The one who over-explained, the one who still needed closure, the one who would have answered even when it hurt. But this time, you've changed. This time, you don't react. Not with coldness, not with cruelty, but with something far more powerful. Neutrality. That's what truly disarms them. Your stillness, your lack of need, your absence of inner conflict. Because when you've done the work, when you've grieved, healed, and grown, you no longer seek a moment that once meant everything. You no longer crave their understanding, their apology, or even their attention. You no longer fantasize about what could have been said differently. You simply know that you're not who you were. And because of that, nothing they offer now could reach the man you've become. So if they come back, be civil if you must, be silent if you can. But most of all, be unmoved. You don't need to prove that you've healed. The calm in your tone, the brevity in your reply, the ease with which you let the moment pass. That's enough. You don't have to close the door loudly. The Stoic doesn't slam it for effect. He simply forgets it existed, because he's already walked through better ones since. 7. Give your energy where it grows, not where it drains. Your energy is not unlimited. It is your most sacred currency, the essence of everything you give to the world. Your time, your presence, your focus, your care. yet too often we spend it recklessly. We pour ourselves into people who only take. We chase after those who leave us questioning our worth. We invest deeply in those who never intended to grow with us, only to find ourselves depleted and resentful. But the truth is, it's not just about who they were. It's about where you chose to plant your attention, because attention is not passive, it's powerful. It gives life to whatever it touches. And when you keep giving life to what only subtracts from you, you lose yourself piece by piece, day by day. There comes a point when you have to stop asking why they couldn't meet you with the same care. The better question is, why did you keep showing up for someone who couldn't receive it? The moment you begin to honor your energy as something valuable, something not everyone is entitled to, you begin to shift the direction of your life. You no longer seek out what looks good, but what feels good, what feeds you, what returns something of substance. You start to recognize the difference between someone who is hungry for love and someone who knows how to hold it. This is where your power returns, not in isolation, but in redirection. You stop giving energy to dead ends. You stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You stop waiting for reciprocity from those who never planned to offer it. And instead, you start pouring into places that reflect your growth. Join spaces that challenge you. Surround yourself with those who speak truth into your life without needing to compete. Find people who celebrate your strength and hold you accountable to your potential. Mentor someone who reminds you of who you used to be. Offer your time to causes that have nothing to do with your past and everything to do with your purpose. When you do this, you begin to multiply, not just in success or productivity, but in peace, in clarity, in quiet confidence that no longer seeks validation from empty places. You begin to see that your energy is not just something to protect, but something to invest, wisely, intentionally, unapologetically. Give your energy where it grows, not where it drains, because the world is filled with people who need what you have to give, but only a few will ever be worthy of receiving it fully. Save yourself for those few, and most importantly, be one of them. Be someone who gives back to yourself with the same devotion you once gave away too freely. Because when you become that kind of person, you no longer fear being alone. You've become your own source. 8. Stop watching their life. Start building yours. It's easy to say you've moved on, harder still to live it. Because even after the last word has been said, even after the silence stretches on and the doors have quietly closed, there's often a part of you that lingers, not in the same space but in their story. You still check, still wonder, still scroll through filtered glimpses of their life, trying to decode meaning from curated moments. You say you're done, but part of you still wants to know, are they happy? Do they miss you? Have they replaced you? But that curiosity isn't harmless. It's not neutral. It's a tether. Every glance you give them pulls you slightly away from your own life, away from your healing, away from your future. Watching their life unfold, even passively, keeps you anchored in a narrative that no longer includes you and never truly served you. This isn't about bitterness, it's about boundaries, and not just external ones. The most important boundaries are the ones you place within your own mind, the ones that protect your energy from wandering where it no longer belongs. It takes strength to unfollow, to mute, to delete. Not because it's dramatic, but because it's decisive. It's you telling yourself, I no longer need to witness a story that has already written me out. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you wise, because freedom doesn't come from pretending you don't care. It comes from finally caring more about what you're building than what they're showing. And what you build next matters more than anything they do. This is your time now, not to react, not to observe, but to create. to put your hands into your life like it's clay and shape something that feels honest and whole and entirely yours. It doesn't have to be grand. It just has to be real. A new routine, a new goal, a deeper relationship with yourself. Something that reminds you, day by day, that the only life you need to keep track of is the one you're standing in. Because when you finally stop watching them, something powerful happens. Your focus returns, your energy rises, and you begin to see your life not as something that's been interrupted, but as something that's just now beginning. Burning the bridge was only the first step. The real strength is in refusing to swim back, even when the waves of nostalgia rise. You are not missing out on their life. You are finally stepping into your own. 9. Rise quietly until they can't reach you. The most powerful growth doesn't make noise. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't ask to be witnessed or validated. It happens in the shadows, in the early mornings when no one is watching, in the small moments where you choose to move forward instead of looking back. Real transformation is quiet, not because it's weak, but because it's rooted. You don't need to prove anything to the people who let you go. You don't need to post pictures or craft clever captions to show them what they missed. If the only way your progress has meaning is when it's seen by those who hurt you, then you're not free. You're still performing for an audience that doesn't deserve your stage. Healing isn't for them, it's for you. And rising isn't about revenge, it's about release. There is something profoundly powerful about choosing not to engage, not to retaliate, not to reopen old conversations, just to feel heard. When you stop needing to be understood by those who chose not to understand you, a door opens. On the other side of that door is peace, deep, steady, unshakable peace. You rise by building something real in the absence of what broke you. You rise by waking up and honoring your routine, your values, your growth. You rise by investing in people who see you clearly, by pouring into your passions, by becoming someone your past no longer recognizes. And you do it quietly. Not because you have something to hide, but because the best things you build don't need outside permission to matter. The joy, the strength, the confidence you grow into, none of it needs to be broadcast. Because when your peace is genuine, the silence speaks for itself. One day, they might notice. They might look for signs of the person they used to know, expecting to find you where they left you, still waiting, still watching. But by then, you won't be there. You'll have moved into a new chapter they can't access. You'll have grown in ways that make their old version of you irrelevant. That's how you win, not by being missed, but by being unreachable. Because rising isn't about making a statement, it's about never needing to. Summary, final thought. Silence on its own is not enough. Anyone can disappear. Anyone can retreat, but not everyone rises. Not everyone takes that quiet and turns it into power. Not everyone emerges from pain with deeper purpose, grounded presence, and a life that speaks louder than any apology ever could. So don't just go silent, go sovereign. Sovereignty is different. It's not about waiting to be seen. It's not about playing a part in someone else's story. It's about writing your own, fully, freely, and without hesitation. It's about reclaiming the energy you once gave away too easily and choosing to use it in service of your own growth, your own peace, your own legacy. When you rise in silence, not as a tactic but as a truth, something changes. You stop speaking the language of your past. You stop needing to be understood by those who were never meant to stay. You evolve into a version of yourself that your old wounds can't even reach. This is not about being cold. It's about being clear. It's not about erasing what happened, but about refusing to let it define who you are now. So say it, not as a performance, but as a promise to yourself. I move on for me. Let those words anchor you, let them guide you, and never again believe that silence is the destination. It's only the beginning. If something in this message stirred something deep within you, let that be your signal, not just to feel it, but to act on it. Share this with someone who needs the reminder, someone who's ready to remember their worth, and if you are ready to rise, to grow, and to finally break free from the patterns that keep pulling you back. Then subscribe to Stoic Station, because new truths are coming. Truths that will anchor you in strength, clarity, and self-respect. And if this spoke to that part of you that's done settling, hit that like button so more people can find their way back to themselves. I'll see you in the next video.